Okay, so there are several ways to factor a trinomial. My favorite is actually kind of a guess and check method, but for this video I want to show you, remind you how to factor by grouping. We're going to do one without a leading coefficient, and we're going to have one where we do have a leading coefficient other than 1. So with factor by grouping, your first step is just to really take what is on the front and on the back, and you sort of recopy them, and you always want to leave space for two terms that you're going to insert into the middle. Now the two terms that you insert in the middle, you have to make sure that whatever these numbers are, okay, these two numbers, they need to add together to get the middle term. So they need to add to the middle term, which is your -6. So that's what you're doing. You're breaking it into two things that add up to -6, but they also need to multiply to make the back term, to make the constant at the back, to create constant. There's my lovely handwriting. So if you can't read it, it says add to middle term, which is a -6, and then multiply to create the constant, which in the back, that's a -55. So I need to think through two numbers, and the way I like to do it, I actually start with this one in the back, and I think what makes a 55 when I multiply. So I'm thinking 5 and 11, right? Can a 5 and an 11 make a -6? Well, they can if I'm going to do -11x and a plus 5x. So that would make my -6 when I add them together. So that's step one of factoring by grouping. Step two of factoring by grouping is I'm going to recopy these, and as I do that, I'm going to group the first two in a set of parentheses, and then I'm going to group what's in the back with a set of parentheses, okay? And the purpose of this is you're wanting to take these two and see if there's a specific term that you can factor out. In other words, they both have an x, so I'm going to take an x out of both. And then over here, I can take out a +5. And when I do that and I divide both of these by 5, I'm going to get x minus 11 again. This is actually awesome because it means you did this correctly and it's going to factor. Anytime these match with factor by grouping, your next step is to factor again. So this factor that they have in common, you're going to take that out to the front of the problem. And if you're factoring out of both of these bigger terms, whatever is left behind is what goes into your other parenthesis. It is your other factor. So this is how you factor by grouping if there's just a 1 in the front. Alright, so now let's try one that's got maybe another number in the front besides 1. Okay, so here's our second example. Now on this one we're going to do the same thing. Even though there's a 2 in the front, we're just going to recopy it. We're going to move this -3 out, and I'm going to create my two blanks for my problem. I'm still going to start with the whole like I need to break this -5 into two numbers. Now the only kicker here is since there's a coefficient in the front, we still want to add to make the middle. Okay, but this time instead of just saying like multiply to make the constant in the back, you actually want to multiply to try to make the constant in the back times the new coefficient in the front. So if there's a number in the front, you actually need to think, oh wait, not just multiply to make -3, but I need to multiply to make 2 times that -3. So I'm trying to multiply and create a -6. So I'm going to start with that. So what times what is 6? Well, I could either do 6 times 1, or I could do 2 times 3. Now somehow we have to put those numbers together to add to a -5 but also multiply to a -6. So what would I do? I think I would probably want to do a -6x and a +1x. I think that will work because, yeah, when I add those together, I get this number in the middle, yet when I multiply them, I get this -6, and that's the goal number. So I'm going to carry on like I did before. I'm going to recopy and group the first two, recopy and group the second two. And now let's factor out of this. Let me see, I guess I could take a 2x out of that, and it would leave behind an x minus 3. Remember, when you're taking something out, when you're factoring it out, you are dividing it out. So I'm dividing out a 2x. Over here, there's nothing except 1 that goes into both of those, so I'm just going to recopy. Now what? Okay, now these match. Hallelujah. So what we do is we recopy those two because we factor them out, and whatever is left in the front is our next parenthesis. Now, this 2x, it's pretty obvious that it's in the front, but don't just leave it as a 2x. There is another number behind it, because anytime a number is not in front of the parenthesis, it's because it's an invisible 1. There she is. So this would be my answer to if there's a leading coefficient. So hopefully this helped you guys out. If you want to practice a couple, well, you know what, just email me or come to class early, and I have a sheet full of factoring problems that you can try. Thanks.